Hello and welcome to today's episode in which I introduce you to Pani Puri, which is possibly one of my favourite Indian foods. I was in the supermarket last week buying ingredients to make the Salisbury steak and I saw these on the shelf. So these are, I want to say these are the puri, also known as golgappa. I can get that framed up for you properly. So the little crispy shells, these ones are made from wheat flour and tapioca starch. Very crisp and crunchy. Texture's a bit like prawn crackers, that kind of thing. I first had Pani Puri in an Indian restaurant that's not too far from me. And they take the little shells, fill them with delicious things, and then they give you like a little jug of dressing. On menus it's called flavoured water, which never sounds great, but it's like a really potently flavoured liquid. You pour it in there and then bosh the whole thing in your mouth. And it's incredible. It's Ramadan at the moment, and when I went to Sainsburys, which is my kind of local big supermarket, they've got a massive selection of lots of Indian bits and pieces, so that caught my eye straight as I walked through the door and thought, oh, that's derailed all of my video plans. I'm going to make some Pani Puri for YouTube. I've been doing some looking online to find different recipes, and I found one on foodviva.com. I'll stick the link to that in the description for you. I'm basing mine on that, but I'm going to tweak a few of the ingredients because I don't have some things. It's going to be a pretty easy one to throw together, I think, because it's just a case of chopping some stuff, blending some other bits, and then assembling. That's it. According to Wikipedia, Pani Puri is a Hindi word which literally translates to water bread. So pani is water, bread is puri. If you're on the lookout for lots of easy and delicious plant-based recipes and you haven't already, like this video and subscribe to the channel. If you hit the bell icon, you'll get an alert as soon as anyone's published. We'll make the pani first, which is the liquid. I'm going to use a stick blender to make up the pani, and I'm going to do it in quite a heavy-duty jug. I'm just tearing up 30 grams of fresh coriander, cilantro in the States, and about the same of mint leaves. There'll be less mint because they obviously weigh the stalks in that. I guess you could use any fresh herb in here, really. If you hate coriander, feel free to use parsley. That's not a problem. Got 2 green chilies. I'm just going to take the top off. Just take that little stalky bit off. I'm just going to cut them into slightly smaller chunks just to make it a little bit easier on the blender. I thought I had fresh ginger and I've just discovered I don't, so I'm going to have to use dried. Not ideal, but it is what it is. So I'll use a teaspoon. I'm going to add some garlic to mine. It's not in the original, but I quite fancy it in there. I'm going to add this much, so it's probably the equivalent of 3, maybe 4 big cloves. Let's do those in the garlic press. The original recipe says to use lemon juice. I'm going to use lime just because I fancy lime instead of lemon. So I'm going to use 3. These are quite small ones. If you're using lemon, do like 1.5, something like that. And I'm just rolling it on the counter because that breaks down the cells. So it makes it a little bit easier to get more juice out. Don't be too heavy-handed with it, otherwise you'll splat it. In the recipe notes, it says the lemon juice is going to stop things browning because leaves start turning quite brown, as well as adding flavour. And adding a liquid when you're blending herbs down into a paste, liquid just makes it a bit easier. Oh my God, my lens is covered. Sorry. All of the ingredients are in, so I'm going to go in with a blender. That's all blended up, so I'm just going to scrape the blade down. Probably took a couple minutes. This stick blender isn't the most highly powered. You just want it nice and smooth, or as smooth as you can get it. The original recipe calls for chaat masala, which I don't have any of. I'm just looking online now, and apparently it's normally made with amchur, which is dried mango powder, cumin, coriander, ginger, salt, black pepper, asafoetida, and chili powder. I've just remembered I've got some mango powder in the cupboard that I bought years ago. Yeah, this is well out of date, but it's fine. It tastes okay. I'm going to use some ras al hanout. This is a blend of things like black pepper, coriander, ginger, paprika, cardamom, mace, all sorts of kind of spiced things in there. You could use a pre-bought curry powder or garam masala. It's just a spice blend that you're after, really. I'll do a half teaspoon of the ras al hanout. So this one is a Middle Eastern spice blend, whereas garam masala is typically more Indian. I'll do kind of a scant half teaspoon of the mango powder. And then got some asafoetida. Not sure 100% how to pronounce that. It smells a little bit like maple syrup, but it tastes quite bitter in a way. I'm adding that amount. It's not even 1/4 teaspoon, I don't think. Okay. Got my pestle and mortar here. I'm going to crush up some kala namak, which is black salt. So it's salt that's got a really high sulfur content, so it smells quite eggy, which is great if you're making like a tofu scramble, when you want kind of an egg flavour in there. I need 1/4 teaspoon, so I'm just going to chuck some in the pestle and mortar, grind it up, and then I'll just put the excess back in there. So I'll just go in and crush that down. I was watching a really interesting video about kala namak. I think it's only produced in one factory now in India. It's quite a dangerous thing to make because they have to use really high temperature fires. If I can find it again, I'll link to it. So 1/4 teaspoon. The original recipe says 3 tablespoons of sugar. I'm going to use some of this coconut sugar that I've had in the cupboard for a while because I think that'll be a nice flavour. It tastes a little bit like brown sugar, that kind of flavour. You could also use things like jaggery, which is an Indian sugar. I'll do 1 tablespoon, mix it together, taste it. I don't know if I necessarily want something that sweet, but we'll see. So I'll sprinkle that in, give this a good mix together. Give that a try. I might do 1 more 1/2 tablespoon of the coconut sugar, but do it to taste. I prefer really sour things to sweet things. Unless I'm eating a bag of candy, obviously, but make a decision if I want any more regular salt. Might add a touch more of the black salt, so I've probably done 1/2 teaspoon. And then just a small pinch of regular salt. Well, this is pink salt, but I now need to add 4 cups of water, which is 480 mils. So I've got 200 mils of liquid in there at the moment. So I'll make it up to 680. I'm gonna put this in the fridge now, and the flavours will develop as it sits in the fridge. I might just pull these stalky bits out. On to making the filling for the pani puri. The original recipe calls it the masala. I've just Googled like the translation of masala, and it's basically a spice blend. So I'm not sure in this context why that would be referred to as masala, unless it's like a general word for mixed something. I don't know. I'm going to chop down a medium red onion. That'll be sprinkled into the little balls raw. I'm going to take the sprouty end off, split it in half, keeping the root bit attached. Peel off the outer layer or 2 of skin. You want the papery ones off. So we're going to go quite a fine dice on the onion because it's a filling. So I don't really want massive chunks of onion in there. And then to make it even finer, I'm going to flip the blade so it's parallel to the board, and I'm going to go this way. Just watch your fingers, obviously. I'll do that kind of 2 or 3 times, and then do the vertical cuts this way. You end up with a very small dice, which is going to be nice and delicate. Feel free to use white onion, yellow onion, anything you like. You could even use spring onions if you want something a little bit less punchy. Onto the rest of the filling. So that onion will go in kind of on its own. In the bowl here, I've got 2 massive jacket potato, baking potato things that I cooked in the microwave and then put through the potato ricer. I'm going to use a few tablespoons of chickpeas. I'm using tinned, but you could use, dried ones that you soak and cook. So I'm going to do spoonfuls that kind of size, and I'll probably do 5. It's about 1/2 cup. I'd reckon maybe 70 grams, something like that. I'm doing a 1/4 teaspoon of cayenne pepper. You could use just red chili powder as well, not a problem. Just increase the quantity to maybe 1/2 teaspoon or so. I'm going to do a 1/2 teaspoon of garam masala. So this is that spice blend that I mentioned before. I've got a small bunch of flat leaf parsley, a couple tablespoons. So I'm just going to scrunch it up into a little mound and run my knife through it. I'd use stalks and everything because I quite like the texture, but feel free to pick the leaves off if you prefer. And you can use coriander at this stage. The original recipe says coriander, but I've got parsley in the fridge, so I thought use that because I've already got coriander in the liquid. And this is going to add a nice bit of fresh lift into it. I'll add a pinch of salt, 1/4 teaspoon or so. Give that a mix together. Just making sure the spices are all evenly distributed. Give that a try. A bit more salt, I think. But we don't need tons and tons of flavour in here because we've got that liquid. A bit more garam masala. But do all of this to taste, If you decide to buy some of that chaat masala, if you see it, feel free to use that. In fact, the recipe says to use chaat masala in here. So I might actually put some of that mango powder in here as well. To make it a bit tangy. Yeah, spot on. So that's that bit done. The original recipe says to use some boondi, which is, it's like little balls of chickpea flour. that's deep fried. I think what they do is make like a batter of gram flour, besan it's called. Besan flour is often a mixture of chickpeas and dry yellow split peas, and they just powder that down. And then you make up a loose batter. I assume they've got some sort of gizmo that you, over hot oil, squeeze it in so you get these little fried balls, so it's little crunchy things. Couldn't see any of those, definitely couldn't be bothered making it. So I'm going to cheat with some Bombay mix. So this has got like dried lentils and chickpeas in it. And it's got these little stick things, which the texture is quite similar to the boondi when I've had it in restaurants. So I'm just going to chop some of this down. This has also got lots of nice spices on there as well. So it'll add, as well as a nice texture, it'll add a bit of flavour as well. Pour some out. And then chop that down. The only reason I'm cutting this down is so that it makes it easier to get it inside the puris. So I've taken it down to that kind of size. This is completely optional. It just is going to give a nice extra bit of crunch as well. So now, assembly time. So I'm going to set up a little production line. One other ingredient that I'm going to use is this pomegranate molasses. The original recipe says to use some tamarind date chutney, optional. I thought I had tamarind in and I've just discovered I don't. So I'm going to use this in place of it. Tamarind's got a very kind of tangy flavour to it, and so does this pomegranate molasses. I think they make it by juicing pomegranates and then boiling it, so it goes quite dark in colour and very sticky and syrupy. A bit sweeter than the tamarind date, although mind you, dates are very sweet, so maybe probably equal, about the same. I've had this bottle years. You only need a tiny amount, so it's, you know, although it's not cheap, I think it was maybe £6 at the time, something like that, but lasts for ages. And you can drizzle it on things like ice cream, it's quite pleasant on that, or use it as a salad dressing, that kind of thing. So now it's just a case of stuffing the balls. I've also just remembered, as well as the boondi, the little fried balls, it also asks for sev, which are like noodle looking things. So if you see bags of Indian snacks and they've got like long pieces that are quite thin, looks a bit like spaghetti, which was another reason for going for the Bombay mix. Got this little liqueur glass here just to pop it on top, because I think that might be easier, because I can be a bit heavy-handed. So just for a second, I'll take that out of the way. So I'm just going to poke the knife into the top. Because these are kind of factory made, there's a line across the middle. So I'm just trying to be a bit mindful that I don't pop the two halves apart. So you want a hole big enough to get the fillings in. And I'm just going to let the excess fall inside because it's a nice bit of texture in the bottom. Take some of the mixture. It is going to be a little bit fiddly, but it's totally worth it, I promise. Like that. A little bit of onion. Another Bombay mix. And then just a little drop of the molasses. And that's it. So once I've done a few, we will come back and do some tasting. So I've made up a little plate of the Pani Puris. I've got 18 in total. And then we've got the dressing liquid, flavoured water, whatever we want to call it, in the middle. Yeah, very excited to dive into this. And then just for the thumbnail, because you couldn't really see the liquid properly, I've put one in a bowl. So I think I'll eat that one. Grabbed one of the littler ones, just so I'm not shoving such a massive thing into my face. So pour some liquid in. You can try and bite the thing in half if you really want to. I don't. Oh, it's like a bath bomb, but flavour. Perfect. Gonna eat this little one. I wanted to do a proper crunchy one because this one's been sitting in liquid. That's amazing. The flavours are really punchy, really bold, but it's also very light. And I imagine I could easily eat that whole plate of 18 and not feel, whoa, that was too much. It's also a pretty healthy dish as well, because the only oil that's in there is in the puris and the Bombay mix. I didn't add any fat at all. So if you're kind of watching your fat intake or anything like that, it's going to be a great dish. It's easy enough to skip the Bombay mix. You could do things like just maybe some toasted seeds. You could roast off some chickpeas in the air fryer, that kind of thing. Just anything that's a bit crunchy. Rice Krispies maybe, cornflakes, that kind of thing. Is it fiddly? Yes. Does it use a lot of ingredients that you might not have? Yes. But on the flip side, as long as you're not keeping your spices in direct sunlight or up against something hot, they will keep for years. Like the potency will start degrading as time goes by. But, you know, I've got a thing of cinnamon that's at least 7 years out of date and it still tastes amazing. So, you know, I mean, we don't really even use the term use by dates anymore, do we? It's more best before. So as long as it's not things like fresh fruit and veg, meat and animal products, that kind of thing. So just learn how to store your spices. I keep mine in a drawer, and it's quite a cool drawer. It lasts for ages. You know, we're using the tiniest amounts. So like the Ras Al Hanout, I think I've had that on the go 3 years maybe, because you're only using, you know, at most a teaspoon at a time. So, you know, all these things will last a while. If you really fancy the idea of the flavours, but it is a bit too much work to fill each one, you know, there's no reason you can't use that kind of thing for a burrito, tacos, anything like that. Initially, I was a bit worried that I'd damage the shells, that they'd just crumble apart in my hand, because I'm, you know, not the gentlest of touches. But as I got used to the movement, it is reasonably stable, so you can hold it quite well in your hand, stuff the mashed potato in with your thumb. So it might be a nice little activity for kids, you know, like a weekend afternoon, something like that. In terms of variations, the first time I had them, I'm sure they were stuffed with paneer, which is like an Indian cheese, a bit like halloumi, a bit. So there's no reason you couldn't put some vegan cheese in there, or you could skip the potatoes and do more chickpeas, maybe crush them down. The red lentil tofu that I made would work really well in those. I'll link to that in the description for you. When I start cutting the video tomorrow, I'll jot down some ideas of other fillings and bits and pieces, and I'll stick that in the pinned comment for you. It's that part of the video that I dedicate to my supporters over on Patreon. Their financial support keeps the channel afloat, but it also keeps my spirits nice and lifted. If you want to sign up, give that extra bit of financial support and get some behind the scenes content as well, I'll leave the link down in the description for you. For plenty more plant-based recipes from around the world and my brain, like this video and subscribe to the channel. If you tap the bell icon, you'll be alerted as soon as a new one's published. There's also a back library of about 150 plus videos at this point, so there's lots of ideas in there for you. And then while you're waiting for the next one, have a look at this.